The penthouse was silent except for the sound of rain against floor-to-ceiling windows, 40 stories above the Las Vegas Strip. Giovanni Castellano knelt on the marble floor of his command center, a room filled with screens showing security feeds from every corner of his empire, and his hands trembled. His hands. The hands that had signed death warrants without hesitation, that had ordered men eliminated with a single phone call, that had built a criminal network spanning 3 states, those hands shook like a leaf caught in winter wind. He stared at his phone. At a text message that had appeared 37 seconds ago. The words burned into his vision, "Your sister Emma has 48 hours. $22,000 or she dies." But this message was not sent to Giovanni Castellano. It was sent to Mia Hartley. And it appeared on his phone because of something he had set into motion 3 nights ago, a decision that would consume every waking moment since. Marco stood near the doorway, rigid, his dark suit pressed so sharply the creases could cut. Beside him, Luca shifted his weight from one foot to the other. 12 other men in black surrounded the room, hands on weapons, watching their boss in a state they had never witnessed. The most feared man in the underworld, rendered completely powerless. Giovanni's voice cracked when he whispered her name. Mia. The word hung in the air like a prayer from a man who had stopped praying 15 years ago. What none of them knew was that 3 weeks earlier, on a night so cold the pavement had frozen solid, everything had begun with a single act of kindness that would dismantle an empire. 3 weeks earlier. A frozen winter night. The temperature had dropped to 18 degrees, and the wind moved through the empty streets of Las Vegas like a blade wrapped in ice. Mia Hartley sat in the break room of Shady Pines Care Home at 2:33 in the morning, her hands counting crumpled bills on the metal table in front of her. $32. $41. $56. $78. That was everything. That was all she had left in the world. She was 29 years old but looked decades older. Her hair, once dark and thick, had thinned from stress and poor nutrition. Deep hollows had carved themselves beneath her cheekbones. Her eyes, a pale green that had once caught sunlight, were now the color of winter sky, tired, always tired. The navy blue care assistant uniform hung loose on her frame. Her hands were calloused and raw from latex gloves, from scrubbing, from the work that had consumed every hour of the last 8 years. Beside the money sat her grandmother's recipe book, leather-bound and water-stained, its pages filled with handwritten notes in fading ink. In the margins, Mia had added her own writing in blue pen. Numbers. Calculations. $47 left. Need $200 by Friday. Emma's medicine appointment Monday. The clock on the wall read 2:48. She had 4 hours until her next shift started. She had not slept. She had not eaten since yesterday at noon when she had taken the leftover chicken from room 312, the man who had not touched his dinner tray. Mia's phone buzzed on the table. Her heart stopped. Text messages at 2:44 in the morning never meant anything good. It was a hospital message. St. Mary's Medical Center. Patient Emma Hartley, age 19. Follow-up appointment scheduled for 7 days from today. Estimated cost, $22,000. Payment must be received within 7 days or patient care will be transferred to county facility and medication supply will be discontinued. Your account balance is currently $0. 7 days. $22,000. She had $78. For the first time in 3 years, Mia began to calculate whether it was even worth continuing to pretend she would survive this. The night was so cold that the air itself seemed to hurt. When Mia left Shady Pines Care Home at 6:15 in the morning, the pre-dawn darkness wrapped around her like a suffocating hand. Her shift had ended. 12 hours of helping elderly residents with toileting, bathing, feeding. 12 hours of smiling at families who forgot to say thank you. 12 hours of eating nothing but coffee and the sandwich a kind nurse had given her when she saw Mia's hands shaking. The frozen pavement crackled beneath her feet. Her breath came out in small white clouds. She wore a coat she had found at a donation center in 2019. It was too thin for weather like this. It did not matter. Her apartment was 4 miles away. The bus did not run until 7 o'clock. She would walk. That was when she saw it. A leather wallet lying open on the frozen sidewalk near the corner of 5th and Madison. It was expensive. She could tell by the grain of the leather, by the stitching, by the way it caught the streetlight. She picked it up. Inside were credit cards with the name Giovanni Castellano. $3,000 in cash arranged in neat stacks. And a photograph. A woman, perhaps 60 years old, with dark hair and Giovanni's exact eyes. She was smiling. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting that was careful and controlled, someone had written, Mama, 1959 to 2024. I carry you with me always. Mia held the wallet in her trembling hands and knew, without knowing how she knew, that this wallet belonged to someone important. Someone powerful. Someone dangerous. The notebook of moral reasoning that had guided her entire life made the decision for her. Her grandmother had kept that recipe book her whole life, had written in the margins everything that mattered. One entry, dated when Mia was 7 years old, read, "A person's character is measured not by what they do when watched, but by what they choose to do when no one is looking. Do the right thing, Mia. Always do the right thing." At 6:53 in the morning, with $78 to her name and a sister who would die in 7 days without $22,000, Mia Hartley walked 7 blocks in the freezing cold to the only address she could find in the wallet. A penthouse tower in downtown Las Vegas that rose like a blade pointing at the sky. The lobby was all marble and silence. A security guard in a tailored suit looked at her with the kind of disdain usually reserved for insects. She was still wearing her care home uniform. Her coat was threadbare. Her hands were red from the cold. "I found something that belongs to someone who lives here," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Giovanni Castellano. The guard's expression shifted. Something cold and dangerous moved behind his eyes. Wait. 15 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Giovanni Castellano himself stepped into the lobby. He was tall. 6'2", with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. His dark hair was silvered at the temples. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than everything Mia owned, with an open white shirt exposing his chest. But it was his eyes that held her. Storm gray. Penetrating. Eyes that had seen things that would break most people, but had not broken him. A scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, thin and precise like a blade had once cut him, and he had decided to keep the wound visible. He moved toward her with the deliberate, controlled gait of someone accustomed to power. Up close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of tobacco and cedar. When he looked at her, really looked at her, Mia felt like she was being seen by someone who could see straight through skin and bone into the core of what a person was made of. "You found my wallet," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath, each word carefully weighted. Mia held it out. Her hand shook. "You dropped it. On 5th and Madison. This morning." He took it. His eyes moved from her to the wallet and back again. He opened it, saw the photograph of his mother, checked the cash. $3,000. The photograph. It was all there, Mia said. "I didn't take anything." "No," he said slowly. "You didn't." He studied her in a way that made her want to disappear. Her threadbare coat. Her calloused hands. The exhaustion etched into her face. The care home uniform with a small stain on the collar that she had not been able to wash out. "What is your name?" he asked. "Mia." "Mia Hartley." "Why did you return this to me?" It was a strange question. Like he was genuinely curious about how someone poor and desperate could choose to do the right thing. Like he had spent so long in a world where people did things only for profit, only for power, that kindness had become a foreign language. "Because it was the right thing to do," she said simply. In that moment, something shifted in his expression. Something that looked like recognition. Like he had been searching for something without knowing what, and he had just found it. "What is your address, Mia Hartley?" he asked. She gave it to him. He listened. He did not write it down. Men like him did not need to write things down. "You will hear from me," he said. It was not a promise. It was a statement of fact, the same way he might have said the sun would rise. When she left the building, the temperature had risen to 22 degrees. The frozen world was beginning to thaw. But inside her chest, something had frozen completely. She had just had a conversation with the kind of man whose name whispered in certain circles could make people stop breathing. She did not know that he had already assigned someone to find out everything about her. That by noon, he would know her full address, her employment history, her sister's medical condition, her exact financial situation down to the penny. That the photograph of his mother, the only photograph he carried, would now carry the imprint of the hands of a woman he could not stop thinking about. What she did not know was that 3 nights later, Giovanni Castellano would receive a package containing a single item, her grandmother's recipe book. And he would open it and read the handwritten notes in the margins. And he would understand, for the first time in 15 years, what it meant to want to protect someone. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next. We are about to uncover something that will change everything. Now let us go back further. Let us understand who these two people were before their paths collided. The sound of footsteps on the marble floor echoed through the penthouse as Marco entered the command center where Giovanni still knelt. Outside, the Las Vegas dawn was breaking. The rain had stopped. The city was waking up. And somewhere in that city, a woman with $78 in her pocket was about to discover that her life had shifted on its axis, that two forces, one of desperate hope, one of absolute power, had begun moving toward each other with the inevitability of gravity. The November wind cut through the Las Vegas streets like a blade wrapped in ice. Stars hung sharp as diamonds above the empty sidewalks, frost coating the pavement in a glittering shell that crunched beneath footsteps. Mia Hartley walked with her arms wrapped around herself, her breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. Her coat, a second-hand thing in faded gray, was too thin for this kind of cold. She had bought it 3 years ago at a thrift store for $4. It had cost her nearly everything she had then, and it was still falling apart. She was walking home from Shady Pines Care Home, where she had worked a double shift. 16 hours on her feet. 16 hours of helping residents who had families visiting them, bringing them flowers and fresh fruit and stories about grandchildren. She had eaten nothing all day except the leftover mashed potatoes from the dinner tray of a woman in room 204. The potatoes were cold by the time she scraped them from the plate into a container she kept in her locker. But they were food. Food was food. The time was 11:34 in the evening. Most people in this city were inside warm buildings, sitting in restaurants with lit fireplaces, drinking coffee that cost more than Mia spent on groceries in a week. She was walking alone on a street where the storefronts had been boarded up for years. Abandoned. Like so many things in this city that were just left to rot once they stopped being profitable. That was when she saw it. A leather wallet, black and expensive-looking, lying on the frozen pavement near an old doorway. The leather gleamed under the streetlight. She stopped walking. She looked around. The street was empty. Just the wind and the cold and this one small object that had fallen or been dropped or left behind by someone rushing through the darkness. Mia picked it up. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. Not from the cold. From what she saw inside. $8,400 in cash. Crisp bills. Untouched. There were 3 credit cards, each one with a name embossed in gold lettering, Giovanni Castellano. And there was a photograph. A woman. Dark hair, beautiful in the way that people in magazines are beautiful. She was standing in sunlight, laughing at something the camera could not capture. She was wearing a white dress. She looked alive. She looked loved. The ID card read the same name, Giovanni Castellano. An address in the Pinnacle Tower. The most expensive building in all of Las Vegas. The kind of address that existed in a different world than the one Mia inhabited. She stood there on the frozen street for 3 minutes, holding this wallet. She thought about the $78 in her bank account. She thought about Emma in Phoenix, in the hospital bed, waiting for a surgery that cost more money than Mia would ever see in her entire life. She thought about the rules that people like her lived by. The rules that said if you found something, and no one was watching, then sometimes you kept it. Because you were desperate. Because keeping it might change everything. She closed the wallet. She put it in her coat pocket and walked toward the Pinnacle Tower. The doorman almost did not let her inside. She was shaking from the cold, her coat was threadbare, her shoes were worn at the heels. The doorman looked at her the way people always looked at her. Like she was something that had wandered in from the street where she belonged. "I found something," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, thin as paper. "I need to return it to the owner. Giovanni Castellano. He lives here." The doorman stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up the phone. 20 minutes later, she was in an elevator. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirrored walls. A woman with dark circles under her eyes. A woman with calloused hands. A woman who looked like she was in the wrong place, who did not belong in a building where the floors were marble and the paintings on the walls cost more than a house. The elevator climbed. It climbed past the 20th floor. Past the 30th. The city below grew smaller and smaller until the lights became abstract patterns on black velvet. Finally, it stopped. The doors slid open silently. Giovanni Castellano stood in the doorway of the penthouse. He was 6'2" tall. His shoulders were broad beneath a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His hair was dark, touched with silver at the temples. There was a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone, thin and white against his skin. He was 47 years old, but his eyes were older than that. His eyes had seen things. They had seen loss. They had seen power. They had seen the bottom of something that most people did not even know existed. He looked at Mia. His entire body went still. "You brought it back," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. Like something that, once spoken, could not be unspoken. It was barely a whisper, barely a sound at all. "The cash is all there," Mia said. She did not move from where she stood in the doorway. She could feel the warmth pouring out from inside the penthouse. She could see the lights of the city sprawling out beyond the windows, all those people down there, all those lives happening in buildings and rooms and apartments where people were together, where people mattered to other people. "I did not touch anything. I just wanted to return what was not mine." Giovanni's hands shook as he reached out and took the wallet from her. His eyes did not leave hers. It was like he was looking straight through her and seeing something invisible, something written on her skin that she could not read herself. "What is your name?" he asked. "Mia. Mia Hartley." He pulled out $2,000 from the wallet with movements that were careful and deliberate. He held the bills toward her. "Take it. Please." She stepped backward. "I do not want money. I just wanted to return what was not mine." She turned and walked toward the elevator. She did not run. She did not hurry. She moved with the careful steps of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible in the world. Behind her, she heard Giovanni say something to someone else, a voice low and urgent, but she did not turn around. The elevator doors closed, and she descended back into the city. Giovanni stood in the doorway of the penthouse, holding the photograph of his dead wife. His hands were trembling. Marco appeared beside him, stepping out of the shadows where he had been monitoring the security feeds. Marco had been with Giovanni for 15 years. Marco had seen many things. But he had never seen his boss look like this. "Boss, who was that?" Marco asked. Giovanni stared at the photograph. At his wife's face, frozen in sunlight. At the smile she would never smile again. Then he spoke, his voice stripped down to something raw, something ancient. "I do not know yet," he whispered. "But find out everything. Her name is Mia Hartley. I want to know where she lives, where she works, why she walks those streets at midnight alone, why she returned $8,000 instead of keeping them. I want to know everything." Marco nodded and withdrew. In 15 years, he had learned to recognize the tone in his boss's voice that meant something fundamental had shifted. Something dangerous had been set in motion. Meanwhile, Mia was riding the bus toward her apartment. The bus was nearly empty at this hour. Just her and an old man sleeping in the back seat and a woman with shopping bags full of cans and bottles. The heater was broken, and the windows were fogged with condensation from everyone's breath. She was calculating. She always calculated. Her paycheck was $340 every 2 weeks. She had just sent the entire amount to Emma's hospital fund. Her current bank balance was $78. That was all. $78 stood between her and nothing at all. It had to last until the next paycheck, 9 days away. She did not think about the $2,000 that Giovanni Castellano had offered. She did not let herself think about that. Because thinking about it would open a door, and once a door opened, it was hard to close it again. The bus pulled to a stop near her apartment building. She got off and walked the 3 blocks through the cold. Her breath came in small clouds. Her feet were numb. The building was a 4-story structure with boarded windows on the ground floor and a broken buzzer system. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Her apartment was a single room with a kitchenette that did not work and a bathroom with a shower that sometimes had hot water. She sat on the edge of her bed and pulled out her phone. She opened the banking app and transferred her entire $340 paycheck to the account labeled Emma Hartley Phoenix Hospital. The amount in the memo line read $22,000 needed by December 15th for surgery. Today was November 17th. She had 28 days to find an additional $21,922. She opened a drawer beneath her bed and pulled out a small book. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed. Her grandmother's recipe book. Inside, written in the margins in her grandmother's handwriting, were notes. Not just ingredients. Stories. Advice. Things learned through a lifetime of working with her hands, of creating something from nothing, of feeding people you loved even when you had almost nothing to feed them with. One note read, "Sometimes the right thing costs everything, but you do it anyway." Another, "Kindness is a language that everyone understands." Mia closed the book and held it against her chest. She did not know that at that exact moment, Giovanni's investigators were pulling her employment records. She did not know that by noon the next day, they would know her full address, her medical history, the hospital bills for Emma's condition, the exact amount in her bank account. She did not know that Giovanni was holding the photograph of his dead wife and thinking of the woman in the worn gray coat who had looked at $8,000 and chosen to return it instead. She did not know that 3 nights later, Giovanni would receive a package from one of his investigators. Inside the package would be a single item, her grandmother's recipe book. It had been retrieved from a pawn shop where Mia had almost taken it, where her hand had almost released it to the counter. But she had changed her mind at the last moment. She could not let it go. Giovanni would open that book. He would read the margin notes in his wife's, no, in Mia's grandmother's, handwriting. He would read the words about kindness and sacrifice and doing the right thing when it costs everything. And for the first time since his wife died, Giovanni Castellano would understand what it meant to want to protect someone. What neither of them knew was that the forces already moving through the darkness would not allow them to exist in separate worlds for much longer. That by the end of the week, a name would arrive, Douglas Hale, and with it, a darkness that neither of them was prepared for. The manila folder sat on Giovanni Castellano's mahogany desk like an accusation. Inside it, a photograph of a woman in a grey coat, her face turned away from the camera, her hand extended toward his wallet as snow fell hard around them. Giovanni's jaw tightened as he stared at the image. He had spent for years building walls so thick that nothing could penetrate them, not love, not mercy, not the memory of his wife's coffin lowering into frozen ground. And then this stranger had walked out of the Las Vegas night and returned $8,000 in cash. Marco sat across from him, his thick hands folded on the armrest, his scarred face expressionless. Luca stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering strip, the city spread out beneath them like a kingdom already conquered. Both men waited. Giovanni did not speak until he was ready, and his men had learned long ago that silence was how he thought. "She is 26 years old," Marco said finally, sliding another document across the desk. His voice was gravelly, textured like concrete. "Works double shifts at Shady Pines Care Home. 6 days a week. Lives alone in a one-room apartment in the West Side. The kind of neighborhood where the streetlights do not work and the police do not patrol." Luca turned from the window. "Every single paycheck goes to Phoenix Children's Hospital. Her sister, Emma, age 7. Rare heart condition. Myocarditis, progressively degenerative. The medical bills are $22,000 and climbing." Giovanni did not move. He simply listened, the way a hunter listens before the kill. "She has worked for 3 years without a vacation day," Marco continued. "She eats the leftover meals from the care home. The nurses there say she never complains. Never calls in sick. Just shows up and takes care of the people no one else wants to touch." Luca added the final document with the precision of a man placing a blade. "Restraining order. Filed 4 times against an ex-boyfriend named Douglas Hale. Every single one ignored." Giovanni's hand closed into a fist. "Why ignored?" "Douglas has connections," Marco said quietly. "His uncle is Captain Richard Hale, Metro Police Department. Every report Mia filed disappeared into bureaucratic dust. Every violation of the restraining order went uninvestigated." The silence that followed was the silence of a blade being drawn. Giovanni stood and walked to the window. The city glittered below him, all those lives moving through their small moments, unaware that everything could be taken away in a single instant. He remembered being 7 years old, remembered his father's belt, remembered the sound it made against his ribs. He remembered blood on concrete and a woman he had never seen before kneeling beside him, saying, "Help is coming, baby. Help is coming." He had never seen her again. He had spent for years and $63 million building an empire so that no child would ever suffer the way he had. So that no one would ever be left bleeding on the pavement. And now he was holding a file about a woman who had shown him kindness when she had nothing, while her 7-year-old sister was dying in a hospital bed. "I want to see her again," Giovanni said. His voice was like stone dropped into water. "Tomorrow. Arrange it." Behind him, Marco and Luca exchanged a look that neither had ever exchanged in the 15 years they had served him. This was new territory. This was dangerous in ways they did not yet understand. What Giovanni did not know was that Douglas Hale had seen Mia enter the Castellano building 3 nights ago. What he did not know was that Douglas was sitting in his truck outside her apartment building at that exact moment, his hands gripped around the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. What he did not know was that Douglas was typing a message to his uncle with his thumb, the words appearing on the screen like a confession, "She is seeing someone. I am going to remind her who she belongs to." The next evening at 6 o'clock, Giovanni walked into Shady Pines Care Home. The smell hit him first, disinfectant and overcooked vegetables and something underneath it, something like desperation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying insects. In the common room, elderly residents sat watching Wheel of Fortune, their faces blue-white in the television glow, their attention turned inward to nowhere at all. Mia emerged from the hallway in blue scrubs that were too large for her frame. She carried a clear take-out container of leftover soup, the kind of soup that had been simmering since lunch, the kind of meal that was better than nothing because nothing was the alternative. She froze when she saw him. "Mr. Castellano. What are you doing here?" Giovanni wore a black suit that cost more than everything she owned. His white shirt was open at the collar, revealing the edge of a scar that ran from his collarbone toward his heart. His dark eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel suddenly exposed, suddenly seen in a way that terrified her. "I wanted to thank you properly for returning my wallet," he said. "You already tried. I told you I do not want money. Then let me buy you dinner. A real dinner. Not," he gestured at the soup container. "Whatever that is." She hesitated. Every instinct she possessed screamed at her to walk away, to retreat to her apartment and her sadness and her grandmother's recipe book. But something in his voice, something in the way he was looking at her like she mattered, made her nod. They walked 3 blocks to a diner called Rosa's, the kind of place where the vinyl booths were cracked and the coffee came in thick ceramic mugs and no one asked questions about how you could afford to sit there all evening if you wanted to. Marco and Luca sat 2 booths away, their presences like bodyguards made of silence. Giovanni ordered the full menu. Mia protested quietly until he said, "When was the last time you ate something that was not leftovers?" and she could not answer because the truth was too shameful to voice aloud. The food arrived. She ate slowly at first, then faster, like someone who had been rationing herself for so long that abundance felt like a kind of theft. Giovanni watched her the way a general surveys a battlefield, with complete attention, missing nothing. "Emma needs surgery," he said. It was not a question. Mia's fork fell to the plate. "How do you?" "I am a careful man, Mia. When someone does something extraordinary, I pay attention." She stood abruptly. "I should not have come. This was a mistake. You have no right to dig into my life. Sit down. Please." She sat because there was something in his voice that made disobedience impossible. $22,000 in 7 days, Giovanni continued. "That is the amount you need. That is what my investigators found." "I cannot accept charity from a stranger," Mia whispered. "Why did you return my wallet?" "Because it was not mine. Even though you clearly needed it." She looked away. "My grandmother always said desperation is when you find out who you really are. She said that in those moments, you either become the person you want to be or you become the person you fear you might become." Giovanni leaned forward. His scar caught the light. "I was bleeding on the pavement when I was 7 years old. My father had used his belt. A woman I had never seen before stopped and called an ambulance. She saved my life. I never got to thank her." He paused. "Maybe this is how I do." Mia's eyes filled with tears that she would not allow to fall. "I cannot," she said. "You can. You will. Because the alternative is watching your sister die while you eat soup from a care home garbage can. Is that what you choose?" The diner door crashed open like a gunshot. Douglas Hale filled the doorway. 6'2", muscular, wearing a police department jacket with the casual violence of someone who believed he could never be touched. His eyes found Mia and locked onto her like a weapon finding its target. "Mia! Who the hell is this?" She stood, trembling. "Douglas. The restraining order says you cannot come near me. That piece of paper is not worth the ink." He walked toward their booth, each step heavy with ownership, with the certainty that he had rights over her body and her choices and her future. Giovanni rose without hurrying, positioning himself between them. Marco and Luca appeared from their booth with the smoothness of predators responding to a disturbance in their territory. Douglas stopped. He looked at Marco's scar, at Luca's cold eyes, at Giovanni's absolute stillness. For the first time, something flickered in his face, a recognition that he was outmatched. "You think your new boyfriend scares me?" Douglas said, but his voice had changed, it had lost its certainty. "Leave," Giovanni said quietly. His voice was like thunder trapped in a closed room. "Or I will make you leave, and what happens after that will not be quick." Douglas pointed at Mia. "This is not over. You belong to me. You will always belong to me." He turned and walked out. The diner seemed to breathe again. Mia collapsed into her chair, shaking so badly that the water glass on the table began to tremble in sympathy. Giovanni kneeled beside her, his movement smooth and careful, the way a man moves when approaching something frightened and broken. Marco and Luca exchanged that same look, the one that said their world had shifted on its axis. "No one is going to touch you," Giovanni said. His hand rested on her shoulder, and his touch was gentler than anything she had ever known. "I promise you that." But at that same moment, in a penthouse suite overlooking the Las Vegas Strip, Cordelia Blackwood was watching surveillance footage on a monitor the size of a television screen. She was 42 years old, polished like a knife, wearing a dress that cost as much as a car. She had been in love with Giovanni Castellano for 3 years, and in those 3 years, he had looked through her like she was made of glass. Now she was watching him kneel beside a woman in blue scrubs. "Who is this?" she asked her assistant, who stood frozen beside her. "Mia Hartley. A care home worker." "Nobody." Cordelia's nails tapped against her desk. Tap. 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 The sound of a clock counting down. "Giovanni does not look at nobodies like that," she said softly. "Find out what would hurt her most. And then find out how to use it." Her assistant did not move. "If Mr. Castellano. He will not find out. Because this woman will disappear from his life before he has the chance to protect her. And then he will understand that kindness is a luxury he can no longer afford." Cordelia leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled beneath her chin, her eyes glittering with the cold certainty of someone who had never been told no. That night, Mia returned to her apartment and opened her grandmother's recipe book. The pages were stained with flour and butter and memory. In the margins, her grandmother had written notes, not just measurements and techniques, but fragments of wisdom. One read, "Sometimes the right thing costs everything, but you do it anyway." Mia pulled out her phone. She had been drafting a message for days, a message she knew would end everything before it truly began. Her fingers shook as she typed. Every word was a goodbye. Every word was protection. "Giovanni, I cannot let you help me. I cannot let you become involved in my life. Please forget you ever met me. Please let me disappear. It is safer for you this way. I am sorry for the kindness you showed me. I am sorry for making you believe that I was worth saving." Her thumb hovered over the send button. One press, and she would push away the only good thing that had ever reached for her. Outside, the Las Vegas night wrapped around the city like a dark fist. And somewhere in that darkness, forces were already moving that neither Giovanni nor Mia could yet imagine. Forces that would shatter everything they were beginning to build. Rain hammered against the warehouse windows like 1,000 fists demanding entry. The Las Vegas night stretched endlessly beyond the glass, neon reflections shimmering on wet asphalt, turning the streets into rivers of fractured light. Inside, everything was still. Giovanni Castellano sat motionless in his leather chair, watching the storm through fingers steepled beneath his chin. Marco stood near the door, waiting for orders that did not come. The clock on the wall read 11:38 p.m. Somewhere in that rain-soaked darkness, Mia Hartley was leaving Shady Pines Care Home after her double shift, unaware that her life was about to shatter into pieces that no amount of money could repair. She walked toward the bus stop, her hospital scrub soaked through, her breath forming small clouds in the cold November air. Her left eye was beginning to swell, not yet, but soon. She did not know this yet. She only knew that her feet ached, that her stomach was empty, and that Emma's surgery needed $22,000 within 7 days. 7 days. She had counted the hours so many times that the number had lost all meaning. Now it was simply a weight pressing down on her chest with every breath. The alley appeared suddenly, dark and narrow, a mouth opening between 2 buildings. Douglas Hale stepped out from the shadows like something summoned from her worst nightmares. He was broader than she remembered, angrier, his face twisted with the kind of rage that comes from desperation and humiliation. His hands were clenched into fists. His eyes were burning. "I warned you," he said. His voice was like gravel dragged across concrete. Mia tried to run. She made it 3 steps before his hand closed around her throat like a steel trap, slamming her backward against the brick wall so hard that the air exploded from her lungs. She tried to scream, but his grip was absolute, crushing her windpipe, stealing every sound except the whistling gasp of someone drowning in air. You think some rich guy is going to save you? Douglas hit her face. Once. Twice. 3 times. Each impact sent lightning through her skull. Her left eye swelled shut immediately. Blood poured from her nose, hot and iron-tasting, running down her throat. Her lips split open. She could taste her own blood mixing with tears. You think you are special? He threw her to the ground. The concrete rushed up to meet her. Air left her body again. He kicked her ribs, once, twice, and pain bloomed like fire across her entire left side. She tried to crawl away, her vision blurring, her hand scraping against wet pavement. Cordelia Blackwood paid me $50,000 to make sure you disappear, Douglas said, his voice cutting through the rain. So guess what, Mia? You are about to disappear. He reached down to grab her hair, dragging her toward his truck parked at the alley's end. Mia's hand closed around something hard and sharp, a broken bottle lying on the ground. Without thought, without hesitation, she swung it backward into his knee. The glass shattered against bone and cartilage. Douglas screamed, a sound like an animal caught in a trap. His grip loosened. Mia ran. Blood streamed down her face. One eye was swollen completely shut now, the world reduced to a single blurry channel of vision. Handprint bruises were already forming on her throat, dark purple flowers blooming against her pale skin. She ran without direction, panic driving her forward, her ribs screaming with every step. She did not know where she was running until she saw it, the warehouse with the black SUVs parked outside, their engines still ticking warm in the cold night. The warehouse door was unlocked. She stumbled through it, her body no longer obeying her commands, and collapsed onto the concrete floor. Marco caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and practiced from a lifetime of catching falling things. Boss! Boss! His voice echoed through the cavernous space. Mia's one good eye focused briefly on his face, then everything went dark. Giovanni appeared from his office within seconds. He stopped completely, every muscle in his body locking in place. In 15 years of building his empire, in 1,000 moments of violence and betrayal and calculated cruelty, he had never been frozen by anything. He was frozen now. Mia hung in Marco's arms like a broken doll, her face unrecognizable, blood dripping steadily onto the concrete floor. Who did this? Giovanni's voice was quiet. When he spoke quietly, it meant that something inside him had shattered beyond repair. Mia's one good eye opened. Douglas. And Cordelia Blackwood paid him $50,000. She paid him to, the words dissolved. Her eye rolled back. Unconsciousness claimed her before she could finish. Giovanni's face went absolutely still, the kind of stillness that makes men step backward instinctively. Call Dr. Reeves. Now. He looked at Marco. Then call Agent Morrison at the FBI. Luca's eyes widened from across the room. Boss, the FBI. Call him. Tell him I am ready to make the deal we discussed. Full cooperation. Every name, every account, everything. In exchange for 2 people delivered to federal prison. Giovanni lifted Mia carefully into his arms, cradling her like she was made of glass, and carried her toward his private office. His hands were shaking. Neither Marco nor Luca had ever seen Giovanni Castellano's hands shake. Dr. Reeves arrived within 15 minutes, his medical bag already open, his movements efficient and practiced. He examined Mia's face with a frown that deepened with each discovery. 3 cracked ribs. Severe contusions across her torso. A possible concussion. Her left eye was badly damaged but would recover. She needs a hospital, he said finally. Proper imaging, monitoring. Not yet, Giovanni said. Not until she is safe. The doctor closed his bag and left without another word. In this world, when a man like Giovanni Castellano made a decision, the world adjusted itself accordingly. Giovanni sat beside Mia's unconscious form on the office couch, holding her unbruised hand between his own. Marco stood in the doorway, watching his boss in a way he had never watched him before. And for the first time in 15 years, Marco saw tears running silently down Giovanni Castellano's face. Not sobs. Not vocal grief. Just tears, falling steady as rain, marking the moment when the most dangerous man in Las Vegas became human. By dawn, everything had changed. Federal agents moved through Las Vegas in coordinated waves. Douglas Hale was arrested at 6:33 a.m. outside his apartment, federal agents surrounding him before his eyes could even open fully. Assault. Stalking. Conspiracy. Accepting bribes to commit violent crimes. 40 years minimum. No bail. No mercy. His uncle, Captain Richard Hale of the Las Vegas Police Department, was arrested simultaneously for corruption, for the restraining orders he had ignored, for the police protection he had sold to the highest bidder. At 6:15 a.m., Cordelia Blackwood's mansion was raided by what looked like an army. The evidence Giovanni had provided showed 15 shell companies, millions of dollars in laundering, a financial empire built on corruption and cruelty. 30 years federal prison. Mandatory minimum. By 8:48 a.m., every news channel in Las Vegas was running her mugshot, her perfect hair disheveled, her face pale with the shock of someone who had never imagined consequences could actually find her. Mia woke at 5:36 a.m., disoriented and aching. Giovanni sat in a chair beside her, watching. "How do you feel?" he asked. She tried to sit up, winced sharply. "Like I got hit by a truck named Douglas Hale." Giovanni handed her an envelope. Inside was a certified check for $22,000 made out to Phoenix Children's Hospital, Emma Hartley patient account. Mia's hand shook so badly she could barely hold it. "I cannot." "You can. And you will. Emma gets her surgery today." She looked at him with her one good eye, the other still swollen shut. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you showed me kindness when you had nothing. Because I swore no child would suffer like I did. Because," he stopped. She reached out, touching his face with her bruised hand. "Because what?" "Because I am in love with you, and I will burn down everything I have built to keep you safe." She stood later, when she could move without screaming, and walked to the window overlooking Las Vegas. The rain had stopped. The city spread below her in shades of gray and gold, indifferent and eternal. She pulled the goodbye letter from her pocket, the one she had written 3 days ago, the one that read like a prayer written by someone who no longer believed in prayer. She stared at the words, "Thank you for showing me what kindness looks like. I love you, but love is not enough when staying means destroying you." Giovanni walked to her and took the letter gently. "You were going to leave. I thought it would save you. You thought wrong." He folded it carefully and placed it on the table. "I found you before dawn because Marco tracked your phone. I knew you were planning something. I refused to let you disappear." On the warehouse screens, the news played on repeat. Douglas Hale led out in handcuffs, his head down, trembling like a cornered animal. Cordelia Blackwood being led from her mansion, cameras flashing, her entire world collapsing in a single dawn. Giovanni watched with Mia beside him. Death would have been too quick. Too easy. Too merciful, he said quietly. 40 years in a federal cage? That is justice. Outside, the November sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, and somewhere in the city below, a little girl named Emma was being prepared for surgery that would give her a future. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. 2 weeks later, Mia sat in a hard plastic chair beside Emma's hospital bed, watching her sister's chest rise and fall with steady, easy breaths. The monitors beat their gentle rhythm, a sound she had learned to love because it meant Emma was alive. The surgery was done. The $22,000 debt was paid. The impossible had become possible. Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked at her sister for a long moment, then at the man standing in the doorway with his hands in his coat pockets. Giovanni Castellano wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than everything Mia had owned a month ago, but his face was softer now, almost gentle. "Who is that?" Emma asked, her voice still drowsy from anesthesia. "Someone who helped us," Mia said. Emma studied him seriously. "Are you Mia's boyfriend?" Giovanni looked at Mia. Their eyes held for 3 full seconds. "I hope so." Mia squeezed his hand. "Yes. He is." Later, outside the hospital, frost coated the parking lot like diamonds scattered across dark glass. The November night was so cold it burned when you breathed. Giovanni and Mia walked slowly, her hand tucked into his coat pocket, their steps synchronized without effort. "The FBI took everything," Giovanni said. His voice was steady, factual, the way someone talks about a building that burned down years ago. "The warehouses in Summerlin. The import business. The accounts. All of it. 15 years of building, gone in one night." Mia waited. She had learned that silence was sometimes the only honest response. "Do you regret it?" she asked finally. Giovanni stopped walking. They stood under a streetlight that hummed with a sound like a dying insect. Not for 1 second. That empire was built on anger. On survival. On the belief that power came from controlling people through fear. He turned to face her. "I was wrong. Power that comes from fear is the weakest power that exists. It breaks the moment someone shows you what real strength looks like." "What does real strength look like?" "Like a woman with $78 to her name returning a wallet to a stranger because it was the right thing to do." Mia pulled her grandmother's recipe book from her coat. The leather was soft from decades of handling. She opened it to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "My grandmother wrote in the margins. Look at this one." She pointed to flowing cursive in blue ink. "The best recipe is the one you make with someone you love." Giovanni read it twice. His thumb traced the words carefully, as if they might disappear if he didn't touch them gently enough. "I am going back to work at Shady Pines," Mia said. "Not because I need the money. But those people deserve someone who cares." "I knew." She closed the book and looked at him directly. "You are going to figure out what Giovanni Castellano looks like without the empire." "And us?" "Us is just beginning," Mia whispered. They kissed under the freezing stars, 2 broken people who had found each other in absolute darkness and chosen to step into the light. The camera shifted. Douglas Hale sat alone in a federal prison cell, his back against concrete, his head in his hands. His handsome face had become hollow. His muscles had begun to atrophy. He had 40 years to think about what he had done. 40 years of concrete and steel and men who had nothing to lose. In a women's facility 300 miles away, Cordelia Blackwood stood in the prison yard wearing the same gray jumpsuit as every other inmate. Her blonde hair had begun to dull. No amount of money could buy her way out of this cage. No social connections existed behind these walls. She was just another criminal serving time for money laundering, for conspiracy, for the systematic cruelty she had committed against a woman she barely knew. 2 weeks became a month. The community center opened on a Tuesday morning in the poorest section of Las Vegas, a red brick building that used to be a condemned auto shop. Giovanni had purchased it with his offshore money and transformed it into something alive. Free medical care on Tuesdays. Job training on Wednesdays. Shelter for women and children with nowhere else to go. Mia stood in the main room watching a small boy, maybe 7 years old, get a free meal. He ate slowly, carefully, the way children eat when they are not sure when the next meal is coming. Giovanni watched from the corner, and Mia saw tears in his eyes. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I am thinking that boy is me," Giovanni said quietly. 30 years ago, I looked exactly like that. I was so hungry I could barely focus on anything else. If someone had shown me kindness then, maybe I never would have become what I became. An elderly woman approached Mia, took both her hands. "Thank you for creating this place. You saved my granddaughter's life." Mia smiled. Thank my partner. He is the one who made it happen. The woman looked at Giovanni. Bless you, young man. Bless you. When she walked away, Giovanni turned to Mia. His eyes were glistening. She called me young man. No one has called me that in years. I always felt ancient. Corrupted beyond repair. Because for the first time, Mia said, "You look alive instead of dangerous." They walked outside into the clear winter night. Frost covered the parked cars like white velvet. Stars hung sharp and diamond bright in the sky. Giovanni stopped on the sidewalk. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. Inside was a silver ring, simple and elegant. I know it is fast. We have known each other 6 weeks. But I have learned that life is too brutal and too short to waste time on hesitation. Mia Hartley, will you marry me? Mia looked at the ring. She looked at Giovanni's face. She looked at the community center behind them, windows glowing warm, filled with people being saved the way she had been saved. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Snow began to fall then, the first snow in 7 years. It fell on Las Vegas like grace, like forgiveness, coating everything in white, making the city clean and new. They stood in the falling snow, two people who had been broken and had chosen to mend each other instead of remaining shattered. The voiceover came soft as prayer. Sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is not money or weapons or empires. Sometimes it is one person who chooses kindness when they have nothing left to give. Mia Hartley returned a wallet because it was the right thing to do. That single choice saved a dying child, destroyed 2 monsters, and redeemed a man who thought redemption was impossible. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe because tomorrow we have another story that will break your heart and put it back together. Comment below and tell us, what would you have done in Mia's place? Would you have returned the wallet or kept the money? What does kindness mean to you? And remember, no matter how dark the night becomes, the dawn always comes. Kindness is never wasted, even when it costs everything. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We will see you again in the next video.